Welcome to Advanced Learning Tutoring. This is the biology playlist. Please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Homeostasis is the regulation of the internal conditions of a cell or organism to maintain optimum conditions for function in response to internal and external changes. Homeostasis maintains optimal conditions for enzyme action and all cell functions. In the human body, these include control of blood glucose concentration, body temperature, water levels. These automatic control systems may involve a nervous response or a hormonal response. All control systems include cells called receptors, which detect stimuli. A stimuli is a change in the environment, for example, light. Coordination centers, such as the brain, spinal cord, and pancreas. Coordination centers receive and process information sent from the receptors. Effectors, which are muscles or glands, and these bring about a response which restore optimum levels. For example, a muscle contracting or a gland releasing a hormone. In the human nervous system, we have something called a reflex arc. The nervous system enables humans to react to their surroundings and to coordinate their behaviour. Information from receptors pass along cells, called neurons, as electrical impulses to the central nervous system. The central nervous system includes the brain and the spinal cord. The central nervous system coordinates the response of the effectors, which may be muscles contracting or glands secreting hormones. Reflex actions are automatic and rapid. They do not involve the conscious or thinking part of the brain. This prevents humans from getting hurt. A stimulus is detected. An electrical impulse travels along the sensory neuron to the relay neuron in the central nervous system. This then passes to a motor neuron, which carries the impulse to an effector. An example of a reflex action may be placing your hand on something hot and your arm muscles contracting to move your hand away from the hot plate. Receptor cells in your skin detect this hot temperature. Electrical impulses travel along the sensory neuron to the relay neuron in the spinal cord. The relay neuron carries the electrical impulse to the motor neuron. The motor neuron carries this electrical impulse to a muscle, the effector. The muscle then contracts and withdraws the hand. There are gaps between neurons known as synapses. A synapse is where two neurons meet. An electrical impulse travels along the first axon. An axon is a part of a neuron. A neuron is another name for a nerve cell. This triggers the nerve ending of a neuron to release chemical messengers called neurotransmitters. These chemicals diffuse across the synapse and bind with receptor molecules on the membrane of the second neuron. The receptor molecules on the second neuron bind only to the specific neurotransmitters released from the first neuron. This stimulates the second neuron to transmit the electrical impulse. Investigating reaction times. Investigations can be done to determine the effect of a specific factor on human reaction times. A suitable investigation could be the effect of caffeine or the amount of background noise in the room. A simple method to measure the effect is to use the ruler drop test. An alternative method may be reacting to images appearing on a computer screen. There are drawbacks with that method in that everybody in the room would require a computer. To carry out the ruler drop test, you work with a partner. Person A holds out their hand with a gap between their thumb and their first finger. Person B holds the ruler with the 0 at the top of Person A's thumb. Person B drops the ruler without telling Person A, and they must catch it. The number level with the top of Person A's thumb is recorded in a suitable table. Repeat this method 10 times, swap places, and record another 10 attempts. You can use a conversion table to convert your ruler measurements into reaction time, or just record the catch distance in centimetres. If you are investigating the effect of caffeine on reaction time, you would need to test your reactions without any caffeine and then with varying concentrations of caffeine. The brain controls complex behaviour. It is made of billions of interconnected neurons. The brain has many parts. The cerebrum, which is split into 2 hemispheres and is highly folded. It controls intelligence, personality, conscious thought, and high-level functions, such as language and verbal memory. The cerebellum, which controls balance, coordination of movement, and muscular activity. The medulla, which controls unconscious activities, such as heart rate and breathing rate. These are the activities that we do not need to think about and are done automatically. The hypothalamus, which is the regulation centre for body temperature and water balance. Some difficulties of investigating brain function and treating brain damage. Neuroscientists have been able to map the regions of the brain to particular functions by studying patients with brain damage, electrically stimulating different parts of the brain and using MRI scanning techniques. The complexity of the brain makes it difficult to investigate and to treat brain disorders. The eye contains a number of structures. The cornea, found at the front of the eye, refracts light. Light bends as it enters the eye. The iris controls how much light enters the pupil. The lens further refracts the light to focus it onto the retina. The retina, found at the back of the eye, contains light receptors. The optic nerve carries impulses between the eye and the brain. The sclera is the tough white outer layer of the eye. It helps protect the eye from injury. Accommodation is the process of changing the shape of the lens to focus on near or distant objects. To focus on a near object, the lens becomes thicker. This allows the light rays to refract or bend more strongly. To focus on a distant object, the lens is pulled thin. This allows light rays to refract slightly. In dim light, radial muscles of the iris contract. Circular muscles of the iris relax. This dilates the pupil, allowing more light to enter the eye. In bright light, radial muscles of the iris relax. Circular muscles of the iris contract. This contracts the pupil, therefore less light enters the eye. Defects of the eye include short-sightedness or long-sightedness. Short-sightedness is where you see near objects clearly but cannot focus properly on distant objects. The causes of this are the eyeball being elongated, so that the distance between the lens and the retina is too great, or the lens being too thick and curved, so that light is focused on the front of the retina. To correct short-sightedness, a concave lens is placed in front of the eye, in glasses. Long-sightedness is where you see objects in the distance clearly, but cannot focus properly on near objects. The causes the eyeball being too short, so the distance between the lens and the retina is too small, or a loss of elasticity in the lens, meaning it cannot become thick enough to focus, and this is an age-related cause. The correction: a convex lens is placed in front of the eye in a glass. New technologies include laser eye surgery. This reshapes the cornea surgically. Common for myopia, but can be used for some hyperopia conditions. Or a replacement lens, where you implant artificial lenses. This is a recent development and can be placed in front of the original lens through a small cut in the cornea to correct an eye defect. The control of body temperature. Body temperature is monitored and controlled by the thermoregulatory centre in the brain. The thermoregulatory centre contains receptors sensitive to the temperature of the blood. The skin contains temperature receptors and sends nervous impulses to the thermoregulatory centre in the brain. If body temperature is too high, the body responds by dilating blood vessels, known as vasodilation, and sweating. Vasodilation increases blood flow to the surface of the skin. The skin appears red in colour. With blood nearer to the surface of the skin, more thermal energy is able to pass into the surroundings. Both these mechanisms cause a transfer of energy from the skin to the environment, as sweat evaporates from the skin, transferring energy. If body temperature is too low, blood vessels constrict, known as vasoconstriction. This restricts blood flow and limits the amount of blood flow nearer the skin, increasing blood flow to the muscles. Sweating stops and skeletal muscles contract or shiver. This increases the rate of respiration and therefore the release of energy. Body hairs lie flat in high temperature, but stand on end at low temperature. This is to trap warm air. The human endocrine system. The endocrine system is composed of glands. Glands secrete chemicals called hormones directly into the bloodstream. The blood carries the hormones to a target organ where it produces an effect. Compared to the nervous system, the effects are much slower but act for longer. The pituitary gland in the brain is known as the master gland. It secretes several hormones into the blood in response to body conditions. These hormones in turn act on other glands to stimulate other hormones to be released. ADH is a hormone released from the pituitary gland. The target organ is the kidney. The role of ADH is to control water content of the blood. The effects of ADH increase reabsorption of water by collecting in the ducts of the kidney. Adrenaline is a hormone released from the adrenal glands. Adrenaline has several targets, including the respiratory system and circulatory systems. The role is preparation for fight or flight. The effects of adrenaline increase breathing rate, heart rate, flow of blood to the muscles, and the conversion of glycogen to glucose. Insulin is released from the pancreas. The target organ is the liver. The role of insulin is to control blood glucose levels. The effect of insulin increases the conversion of glucose into glycogen for storage. Other glands include the thyroid gland, which produces a hormone called thyroxine, the testes, which produce testosterone, and the ovaries, which produce estrogen and progesterone. Blood glucose, or blood sugar concentration, is monitored and controlled by the pancreas. If there are high levels of glucose in the blood, the pancreas identifies and releases insulin to lower blood glucose. It does this by converting glucose into glycogen, which is stored in liver cells. Therefore, blood glucose is reduced. If there are low levels of glucose in the blood, the pancreas responds by releasing a hormone called glucagon, which converts the glycogen store in the liver cells back into glucose to be released into the bloodstream. Type 1 diabetes is a disorder in which the pancreas fails to produce sufficient insulin. It is characterized by uncontrolled high blood glucose levels and is normally treated with insulin injections. In type 2 diabetes, the body cells no longer respond to insulin produced by the pancreas. This is due to poor diet. A carbohydrate-controlled diet and an exercise regime are common treatments. Obesity is a risk factor for type 2 diabetes. The control of blood glucose concentration and the negative feedback system. As blood sugar level increases when consuming sugary or starchy food, this is because starch is broken down into sugar molecules into the blood, insulin is then released. Insulin converts glucose into glycogen, which is stored in the liver cells, therefore maintaining optimum blood sugar levels. If blood sugar levels drop, if exercising or for not eating for a while, you have low blood sugar. The pancreas responds by releasing glucagon. Glucagon converts the glycogen that is stored in the liver back into glucose, which can be released into the bloodstream. Water and nitrogen balance in the body, and the effects of water and changes in bodily fluids. Water leaves the body via the lungs during exhalation. Water, ions, and urea are lost from the skin in sweat. There is no control over water, ion, or urea loss by the lungs or skin. Excess water, ions, and urea are removed via the kidneys in the urine. If body cells lose or gain too much water by osmosis, they do not function efficiently. Therefore, water levels need to be maintained, and this is done with the use of the ADH hormone. Nitrogen levels are controlled when the digestion of proteins from the diet results in excess amino acids, which contain nitrogen, which need to be excreted safely. In the liver, these amino acids are deaminated to form ammonia. Ammonia, which contains nitrogen, is toxic and is immediately converted to urea for safe excretion. The kidneys produce urine by filtration of the blood and selective reabsorption of useful substances such as glucose, some ions, and water. The role of ADH and the kidneys. The water level in the body is controlled by the hormone ADH, which acts on the kidney tubules. ADH is released by the pituitary gland in the brain when the blood is too concentrated, which means less water, and it causes more water to be reabsorbed back into the blood from the kidney. This is controlled by negative feedback. In homeostasis, the aim is to maintain a normal water content of the blood. So if too much salt is eaten or too much sweating occurs, and therefore you are losing more water and the water content of the blood is low, the brain releases a lot of ADH from the pituitary gland, causing a high volume of water to be reabsorbed by the kidney, and small volumes of concentrated urine are passed to the bladder. If too much water has been drunk, the water content of the blood is too high. The brain responds by releasing little or low amounts of ADH from the pituitary gland. low volume of water is reabsorbed by the kidney, and a high volume of dilute urine is passed to the bladder. Therefore, a low volume of water passes into the blood, maintaining normal water content. People who suffer from kidney failure may be treated by an organ transplant or by using kidney dialysis. Dialysis is a procedure to remove waste products and excess fluid from the blood. This is when the kidneys stop working properly. It often involves diverting blood to a machine to be cleaned. Hormones in reproduction. During puberty, reproductive hormones cause secondary sex characteristics to develop. For example, the development of breasts. Estrogen is the main female reproductive hormone produced in the ovary. At puberty, eggs begin to mature and one is released approximately every 28 days. This is called ovulation. Testosterone is the main male reproductive hormone produced by the testes and it stimulates sperm production. The hormones involved in the menstrual cycle of a woman. Menstrual cycle is the period. FSH, which is the follicle stimulating hormone, causes maturation of the egg in the ovary. LH, the luteinizing hormone, stimulates the release of the egg. Estrogen and progesterone are involved in maintaining the uterus lining. Looking at the graph, we can see the cycle of how an increase and decrease of these hormones act throughout a 28-day period. FSH, released from the pituitary gland, causes an egg to mature in the ovary. It stimulates the ovaries to release estrogen. Estrogen, which is produced in the ovaries, inhibits FSH being produced, so that only one egg matures in a cycle. Estrogen repairs, thickens and maintains the uterus lining and stimulates the pituitary gland to release LH. LH, released from the pituitary gland, triggers ovulation, the release of the mature egg. Progesterone, released from the ovaries, maintains the lining of the uterus during the middle part of the menstrual cycle and during pregnancy. When progesterone levels drop, this causes the shedding of the uterus lining. There are two different types of contraception: hormonal and non-hormonal methods. Oral contraceptives contain hormones that inhibit FSH production so that no eggs mature. Injections, implants or skin patches release small amounts of progesterone to inhibit the maturation and release of eggs for a number of months or years. Non-hormonal methods, such as barrier methods, as condoms and diaphragms, prevent the sperm from reaching an egg. Intrauterine devices, which prevent the implantation of an embryo or release of a hormone. Intrauterine devices are placed in the uterus of the female. Spermicidal agents, which kill sperm. Abstaining from intercourse when an egg may be in the oviduct, or surgical methods of male and female sterilisation. Hormones can be used to treat infertility. Hormones are used in the process of IVF, in vitro fertilisation. This includes giving FSH and LH in a fertility drug to a woman. She then may become pregnant in the normal way. Whereas IVF involves giving a mother FSH and LH to stimulate the maturation of several eggs. The eggs are collected from the mother and fertilized by sperm from the father in the laboratory. The fertilized eggs develop into embryos. At the stage when they are tiny balls of cells, 1 or 2 embryos are inserted into the mother's uterus. Although fertility treatments give a woman the chance to have a baby of her own, It is very emotionally and physically stressful. The success rates are not high, and it can lead to multiple births, which are a risk to both the babies and the mother. The roles of adrenaline and thyroxine in the body are part of a negative feedback system. Adrenaline is produced by the adrenal glands in times of fear or stress. It increases the heart rate and boosts the delivery of oxygen and glucose to the brain and muscles, therefore increasing rate of respiration, releasing more energy, preparing the body for fight or flight. Thyroxine is released from the thyroid gland. It stimulates basal metabolic rate. Metabolic rate is the sum of all chemical reactions in the body. It plays an important role in growth and development.